Welcome back to another episode of Raise 'em Up. Great to be with you here in season 6. That still blows my mind that we are in season 6. And we got a cool book.
Mm-hmm.
I'm loving this book. Granted, because like we kind of talked about last time, I love all the personality tests, all the different things, but I especially love like I'm still excited to see, like, because this is something that this concept at least has been with me for over a decade, y'all. That's weird to even say that. But like, I'm still looking forward to how we're going to be able to leverage this. And we're here in chapter 2, where the focus is
Strengths and weaknesses.
Strengths and weaknesses. But the cool thing is that we actually get to dive into what these colors are and what they mean, right? Which is always the most fun part of the conversation is being able to dive on in and just see what are all the different nuances and the ways that these kids are wired, the way that we're wired ourselves. And I appreciate where the chapter kind of started of talking about how wiring is temperament. Wiring is learning the native language of a person. I love that.
That you can't change somebody's wiring.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I can't.
There's
Yeah.
and there's a lot of push and pull toward different kinds of wiring.
Yeah.
So like, you know, you can be heavily influenced by a parent that's got different wiring than you because your expectations are partially molded by them. You know, and you can learn that certain behaviors tend to work well for you in a situation and other behaviors not so much. So I appreciate that in this entire framework, there's the understanding that you have a wiring, but you're going to experience some push and pull. You might mask some of your natural wiring at times. Some things might be elevated in certain environments, depending on stress, depending on who's around. So this isn't something that's, you know, like hard and fast, and this is always the way you're going to experience it, and this is a blanket statement. But this is something to help you to understand how you're processing things in general most of the time.
And how your kids are, right?
Yeah.
So like when you're interacting, and I think in the classroom and then with my own children, how I'm interacting with them and realizing, you know what, there are times when I was like, you just need to do this
or figure it out.
Or respond this way because this is the correct way.
Right.
Because in my yellow brain, this is how everybody should do it. And this is the right way. But then looking at it and realizing, oh, wait, no, just because this is the way I respond and react doesn't mean my way is the right way. And I'm not going to change the way they're looking at something or hearing something that I said just because I say, I didn't mean it that way.
Right.
Sure.
So
You're not gonna
that's
change
what
their
I think
wiring.
is fantastic.
Yeah. Which like goes back to the last chapter about expectations and goes into like, I appreciate it's kind of like, I can imagine, I don't know what this is like, but when God gives you a baby, right? So much of you as a parent is just trying to figure out how it works.
They should I used to say.
There's no manual that comes with
That's
these
what
babies.
I was going to say.
There's no
I should have
manual.
had an instruction manual for each of my children because my
They're
children
different,
are very different.
And I
Very
think
different.
going back to expectations, I think sometimes what I see in parents is they expect at certain ages it gets easier. And it's like, no. Your whole journey of raising your kid is discovering who they are, how they were made, how they're wired,
And what
and
they
then
need in that
leveraging
season.
that.
Yeah.
Leveraging that for the conversations and things like that. But I also just appreciate because, like, again, I'm walking in this time with the coaching hat on because it talks about like if you work with kids on a sports team. And I was like, I'm so excited to hear, I've always known these different personality types. I know how to utilize them in a classroom. I know how to utilize them in a small group setting. I know those things. I've never thought about how do I apply this to coaching a team before. So it's kind of like, that's the fun piece for me is, okay, now discovering this wiring, what is it going to tell me about how to lead in a coaching
Right. And
job?
something I want to bring that both Melanie and Jan just mentioned, but I think you have to also own your own wiring
Sure,
to
yeah.
extent. Otherwise, what you're going to find out is that we're going to start to impose what we think culture wants or what we think is needed, as opposed to first accepting this is how God wired me. And that's a huge message to your children, because then they see themselves as, if mom and dad accepted who they are, I can be accepted for who God created me to be.
Yeah.
And that's a powerful message to give to your children. Subconsciously, when you accept who you are and then look at them and says, this is how God wired you.
Yeah, we're
Now,
different.
I got to figure out how, because we are different wiring, how can I bridge that?
Yeah.
And what communication skills I can bring, which is not to take away from how God wired you.
Yeah.
Right.
So, for example, in my world, being a yellow and all that, I had to learn a few things to equip me so that I can deal with the two blues in my house.
Yeah.
And that was beautiful for me to discover and walk through, because first I had to own my yellow and not feel like, why am I different? Oh, those kinds of questions, even as a parent, you might have.
Yeah. So as you're walking through this book and these resources, the goal is not for you to dismiss, ignore, or suppress your wiring. It's to help you learn how you tend to operate and help you learn how your kids tend to operate so that you can speak a language that makes your relationship effective and a blessing.
Good. Yeah.
Amen.
I like that word effective. Like, because again, I've been using the words, how do I leverage how they're wired to actually, like, because in a lot of ways in a coaching situation, like I want them to become a better player. Like that's what I want.
Yeah.
I want them to become a better teammate, right? So I can definitely see how this works. And look, maybe we can say it this way, or like when you're given the feedback. And I would imagine the same thing is true when you're parenting, right? Because again, in a small group setting, in a classroom, I'm like, I'm here all day long. Let's talk forever about how this works. But it's so interesting to think of that dynamic that our listeners are walking through, whatever that is, of how do I live a life in a household, like, and acknowledge the wiring, or how do I coach, or how do I do these different things?
And I think it's more personal in your household. I think there's that, I take things more personally with my daughters, right? And even my husband than in the classroom. Things that I intuitively or that I do in the classroom, because you realize you've got this class or this group now that I'm working in kids ministry of kids with all these different personalities. So you try to make sure that you're doing things that's going to engage and equip everybody and help everybody to feel validated and to feel like they're important. Once you get to your house, and I don't know if it's the smaller numbers. I don't know if it's because, like I said, I take it more personally and make it more about me than about them. Like my perspective has changed, kind of thing. But it's so funny because as I'm reading this, I'm like, oh yeah, I know that, and I do that here, but I need to do that here too.
Yeah.
So, and it's that I take things more personally. Like if my kids say, "Well, you said this," and then I'm like, "No, I said this." I internalize and take that personally instead of going, oh, wait, like I would in the classroom, let's look at why they're saying that kind of thing. But at home, I'm like, no, I said this. It's just a different dynamic. It's interesting.
But I also think it
and
goes
I don't want to do
that whole thing of like, you've known your daughters since before they were born. Okay. So like you've known them, you've watched their full journey versus like in a classroom setting, you've just met this student for a year. It's very obvious this is someone else's, but like your relationship with your daughters is very personal, right?
Yeah.
Because it's been a lifetime and it's been close, and you've raised them and you've watched it. So there's a much more, for lack of a better word, intimate connection with your family. So of course it's going to be a little bit more personal and a little bit harder to navigate too. Absolutely.
Well, and there's I can do this at work because it's for my job, it's public, and it's a limited time. Versus when you go home, it's private, it's my safe space and what I need, and it's forever, you know? And so the pressure feels different in those interactions. So yeah, I definitely can see
I kind of say, let's get to the goods. Let's talk about, and I think I love the spectrum that it gives. It kind of sets there's 4 colors, friends. There's red, yellow, green, blue. Red, yellow, green, blue in no particular order, as I like to share with people whenever they do colors. Even though it's so funny because I actually always put red first because out of the 4 colors, I think red's like being first, right? So, but like there's 2 different ends of the spectrum that these colors fall on. There's being introverted, there's extroverted, and there's being people-oriented or task-oriented, which it's kind of fun. I was talking with Melanie a little bit. Again, I've been doing some version, which is kind of fun. It kind of lays the groundwork and says this is a thousands of years old thing and conversation. And they use all those little interesting words of the biles and the whatnots, right? But like, so we have these extremes, and I deeply appreciate, this is how I have, not always, I can't say always because I had to learn at some point, but understood what introverted mean and what extroverted mean, right? Because sometimes people think that being extroverted is you're people-oriented. And it's like, no. And it's so funny because I'm an introverted, people-oriented person, right?
Yeah.
So, but I loved how it was about how you think.
Yep.
Do you think and you process out loud, or do you think and you process internally? And that's the difference between an introvert and an extrovert.
Yeah. So in this case, it's all about thoughts and communication, thoughts and words. So, when you're receiving information, is it something that then process out loud, externally. You need to bounce ideas off of each other. Are you ready to give an answer as soon as somebody asks a question, or are you somebody who needs the time to think it through, is probably not going to be quick to respond, but is going to be very thoughtful and careful with your words? And so, yeah.
And it makes so much sense when you think of kids, right? Because it's like, think about how many times, and especially I'm in a coaching world right now, where you will say something to a kid and they will vocalize exactly what came into their brain.
Yes.
And they shouldn't have.
No filter. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really interesting. I have an introverted child and an extroverted child. And so for a while, I'm sitting there going, oh my gosh, what's wrong with my introverted child? Is she sad? No, she's not. She just needs a little bit extra time. And so sometimes I'm like waiting and I give up. And she's like, well, wait, where are you going?
Yeah.
So really, it's been very helpful just to understand that piece of it, because she's a people-oriented introvert. And he's a people-oriented extrovert. So I definitely get both sides of the spectrum there.
Yeah. Well, and that's where like I think of times where I'll make a coaching decision or I'll say something, and like this has happened a lot recently apparently, because I'm like, the immediate reaction is, well, that's stupid. And I'm like, excuse me? Right? But what it is they don't have the introverted filter that I do. And so they are just processing out loud what they think. Or you think of like classroom talkers, right? That's a big thing. And that could be either your reds or your yellows, because they're external processors and they want to say things out loud. Like, and that's where like, it's so fun doing these colors too, because it's like, I am like such a blend, and like I always say like, I'm divergent. Going back to that book series of like, I resonate with so many, but I appreciate how Melanie's kind of said like, you want to start to try and identify and focus in on and give your attention to whatever that main one is, because that's kind of going to be the core, the dominant.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's true. You're not going to fit any of these descriptions perfectly. You might find 5 or 6 on the list that just nail you. And there's a few, that it's like, that's not me at all. But if it's your dominant temperament, then there's something to be learned in the overall view. And same thing with your kids. So like, if we were looking at yellows, I might say, that's my son to a T for these 6 categories. But for this one, that's really not him. That's okay. That doesn't mean he's not a yellow. It doesn't mean he doesn't fit. It just means that it's not how it's presenting in him.
And I want to take a moment to, before we really dive into these, like some people might be listening and going, why is this like Christian parenting podcast talking about just psychology and things like that? And what's kind of fun is, again, these colors, I first got introduced to it when I was a second summer of a director of a Christian summer day camp. But since then, right, I used it all the way through. I've used it here at Trinity a couple of times. I talked about how we had this event called Epicenter where I would always do this color test presentation. And every time I would start that presentation, start and end. It's like, when we talk about things like wiring, this is what we would call first article stuff, right? In the first article of the Apostles' Creed, we say, I believe in God the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth, right? This is how God created you. This is how God designed you. This is how God wired you. And so this whole conversation that we're going to be having this season is just honoring the way that God has designed people. And again, historically speaking, history has spoken to the psychology of what this means. And all psychology is discovering the way God has wired minds and then working with that and leveraging it. So I just wanted to make sure when we say like, you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that's what this podcast is about. Yeah. Like you being a yellow, you being a red, you being a green, you being a blue is awesome, because that's how God made you to be. I even had a slide at the end of the presentation that would say like, when your friend is talking and it's annoying you, say, they must be a, and I have a blank. And and they must be a yellow. And that's just how God made them, right? So I would have them repeat these phrases so that it would be just that practice of honoring that piece.
Yeah. I love that the author too sees her calling in this effort of helping people understand their wiring and the wiring of their kids. She is all about Ephesians 4:29, which is, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is good for building people up according to their needs. And so she's her website is Kind Words Are Cool. And so she just wants people to learn how to speak so that their words are a gift to the people that are hearing them. And she's recognizing that different people with different wiring need and respond to different words. And so, her heart for this book is similar to our heart for this study, in that we want to make sure that as we're raising up kids in the faith, that we're speaking to them in a way that builds them up to be the people that God created them to be.
Absolutely. So when we think about this framework, we got introverted, extroverted. How do they think? And then the other side is people-oriented or task-oriented. All right, so what do we mean by that? I appreciated the simple version.
I love the way she broke it
who
down.
are the to-do.
This is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Even the introverts and the extroverts, because in my brain, I always thought, introverts are those people that never leave their house and want to be all by themselves. And extroverts are those people that are always out socializing. And that's not what she said. No, introverts are the people that think first, right? They're processing internally before they go out. They're those soft-spoken people. The extroverts, they just say what comes in their brain.
Sure.
They think by speaking.
Yeah. I mean, and then I loved the task-oriented and the people-oriented, right? Task-oriented is, okay, the things that I need to do is what's first. That's what I'm thinking of. Okay, this needs to be done. How are we getting this done? People-oriented, they're thinking about, hey, who am I going to do this with? Who wants to come with me to do this?
And I appreciated the phrases, right? So it says task-oriented phrases that you might hear. Hurry up, it's time to go, right? Because the importance is going. Are you done with that yet? Are you done doing that thing yet? I'll take care of it, okay? Let me just finish one more thing. Let me just do one more thing. And then the people-oriented, it sounds more like, that sounds like fun. Let's go together. Or who's going to be there? Or I can't wait to see you tonight. I can come over and help you, right? So it's not, I come over and help with that. I can come over and help you, right? So you can see the language of, am I focused on who is going to be there, or am I focused on what we're going to do? I love the extremes. And so I think with that, we can dive in a little bit to each of the colors.
Let's do it. Yeah. Where are we starting?
So fun.
Well, I typically like to start with reds, but this book starts with
yellows.
I start with the brightest first.
Start with the party.
We'll celebrate y'all first.
There we go.
We better start with you, otherwise, this chatty stuff is.
That's right. We're not going to listen anyway to anything you
have. So one thing that I appreciate about the author is she talks in the other book, and I said this, you heard that. She says, she talks about strengths and struggles. And I really liked that, especially as a mindset to go into with your kids. So as we look at the strengths, and then there are some struggles, it's not necessarily that this is always going to be a weakness, but it might be something that causes some friction, causes, some more obstacles for a kiddo who doesn't know how to harness their strength.
Well, and it's so funny, Uma, as I think about working with you. It's so funny that you land on the yellow side, because I know you're people-oriented, but I've also seen you as task-oriented. So I would imagine
that is some of the acquired skills that I had to. And it actually started more when I became a teacher.
Oh, okay.
Because it took me out of my comfort zone and forced me into this environment.
Well, I'm just thinking
so my classes are still very people-oriented, but I had to learn because of all the red... What do you call red label?
Red tape?
The red tape. You see, it's red tape.
Red tape.
It is red tape. It's not blue tape.
To do the
it's
lesson
never green
plan,
tape.
so to have all that stuff done. So I get it out of the way so I can be a yellow when I'm with my kids.
So this is, I guess, there's a couple of things that are coming to mind. I think of, Uma and I got to go to Mescalero together this past summer for a mission trip. And it was so funny to me because I know you as Mr. People-oriented, Mr. Extrovert. Absolutely. But the first thing Uma does when we've all set up our rooms is declare his rules for the room. You're going to make your bed. You're going to put your things in your bag. You're going to do these things. And I was like, who are you and what have you done with Uma?
Oh my gosh.
I was expecting the music to be playing. I was expecting all these things because I'm not a yellow. That's not me. But I was like, we're going to have a fun because I'm people oriented. So I was like, we're going to be fun. But it was all the task stuff. And then I think too, contrasting your office with my office, there's nothing in your office and there's still stuff from my office that I left a year and whatever ago.
I feel like part of that is I've learned, and this is part of that finding your
own
space,
unique,
right? Is I need things to be organized in my external world because my internal world is constantly chaotic.
I like that.
And so for me, so even my room, like I color coordinate my t-shirts and my shirts,
Wow.
which is so weird. But I do that because then
I did that at one point in my life. Like I appreciate that. Yeah.
I did, and even my like stuff, I like my desk. I know it may look kind of somewhat messy, but I know exactly where things are.
You seen
and
mine?
organized.
I was gonna say, have you seen mine?
I don't know, but I think it's part of it is because I can't control the chaos inside my head.
No, that's fair.
This
That's
is
super
what
fair.
I choose to control.
Because I'm somewhat of an opposite, right? In the sense of like I am so in the brain and categoric, like moving it in a process and systematically doing certain things. That my exterior, maybe not so much.
Right.
Yeah,
It's a
my
sign of
handwriting-
genius. A messy desk is a sign of genius.
Messy
I'm
desk and bad
holding
handwriting.
onto that. I'm holding tightly
My
to
only
that.
hope, right? No.
All right, so yellows.
Let's do it. Let's
Okay.
do it.
Yellows.
So they are the extroverted kids
Right.
who are also people oriented. So they're quick to share their thoughts and feelings, and they care a lot about the people around them.
Yes.
And these, if you see them as toddlers, these are the ones that come up and tell you, this is what I'm wearing today. And these are my shoes. And, just want to talk to you, just want to connect. And like, no, not afraid, not, just bubbly sunshine. I think yellow is a great color for them.
Yeah. I love,
category.
yeah.
I love the like the language of the book of the speaking the language of.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yellows speak the language of people and fun.
Yep.
Right.
All the time.
People
Yeah.
and fun. And some things that they care about are things like affection and approval. So they want to make sure that,
They're like-
we're
They
good,
wanna have
we're good,
fun.
Cool.
Yeah, they want to have fun, but they want everyone else to have fun too.
Exactly.
Yes.
Which is
Yeah.
so funny because before we were starting, we were saying like, yellows can dip into the judgment of like, why aren't you having fun?
Exactly.
Like I'm
Yeah.
having fun. Are you
Yeah.
okay?
Are you
Is
okay?
everything
Something's wrong.
Yeah.
Again, it's that processing out loud with someone that's like, I'm fine.
I'm good.
Well, you're saying you're fine, but I don't know if you're fine because I'm not seeing that you're fine. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
So let's take a look at some of the strengths. So we've got, storytelling, enthusiasm, affection, somebody who's expressive and animated, sees the bright side, accepting of others, spontaneous. What are some that stand out to you that like, this is me? If it's our yellows in the room.
Yes. I think spontaneous for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Accepting of others, that's huge. That's part of my life
Mm-hmm.
thing. Full of energy, yes. As I get older, it's harder to be energized all the time. You might need a few Red Bulls to get going. I think inclusive for sure. Shows emotion openly. I'm always accused of being dramatic, but that's on the weakness side. But that's kind of it. I think I'm charming. And apologize
you're watching
quickly.
For the
video
listener, he
recording.
just like smiled.
Gave us the pose of poses. Yes.
But I think apologizing quickly and doesn't hold grudges is definitely something that I've found myself not necessarily guilty of, but I tend to do that a lot. It's like as
default.
soon as I see I offended someone, like I quick to apologize. But then I also don't hold things.
Yeah.
So I would say those
Those are
things
big
that-
strengths.
yeah.
Yeah. Jan, how about you?
Yeah, no, I for sure the apologizes quickly, doesn't hold grudges. Like I don't want to offend somebody, but then I always try if I'm upset with somebody or something has happened, I always try to look at it. Okay, why did this happen?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
I try not to, and then it's really, and I think maybe learning from teaching. Okay, that wasn't about me, really. Probably it's about something else that's going on.
Yeah.
So that's kind of learned, but yeah, I don't know. I love adventure. I'm easy to make friends with. I will say I'm not great at deep friendships, but I am great at surface level friendships. Like
Sure.
I can, I'm going to be your friend. I'll talk to you. I'm not going to, turn my back on you or whatever. But the deep friendships are a little different. Showing my emotions openly, I would say that one I don't fit the bill.
Okay.
That one I tend to keep things pretty close to my chest. But the rest of them, I see the bright side. I always try to find, okay, there's got to be a reason. There's got to let's find the good in this somewhere because it is there. We cannot sit here in the negative. I can't stand that. Non-judgmental. I try to be. I mean, I'm not perfect. Expressive and animated. I had 2 people in chapel today go, it's so great when you stand in the middle and lead the motions for those girls. It's so funny to watch you. And I'm like, yeah,
It
okay.
just been you.
Yeah.
And then I had another mom whose son is the same age as my oldest, so just graduated high school. He's like, why is she acting like that?
That's so funny.
Is that really how she is?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
That's awesome. Okay. Cool.
And I love like the summary in the chapter like had
yes.
like when it comes to strengths and weaknesses, they had like a key word for each of them.
Yeah.
So it's sanguines was their word, but yellows are known for having loud strengths. So their word was loud, being persuasive and charismatic, and loud weaknesses, being egotistical and showy. It's what makes them the life of the party or the source of the drama.
My kids will say I'm the source of the drama for sure.
Yeah.
That's so funny. All right, next up are our reds.
Strengths of our reds.
This is I was really close to being a red.
This is my lowest score.
I have a child who is a red, and I could be red. They're in some ways.
You might, maybe you're orange, right? Maybe
I don't know. I don't remember what my numbers were.
Well, I'm 50-50 blue and red.
Really?
I think I'm probably just slightly more blue, but I cheated on the test. Because I could not decide, which tells me, baby, I'm green. I don't know. Anyway.
Well, do you feel like this is so fun? Because like I'll go back eventually to the first time doing this test.
Yeah.
Like the lone red that I had on my staff was like, no, I'm not a red.
Oh, absolutely. So every time, if you watch the videos from the sessions that are available on YouTube, if you talk to people, like if you're a red, it usually takes you a while to admit it.
To accept it.
To accept it, to own it. Because often we look at this list and we go like, I don't know if these are the most socially acceptable. Not, that doesn't sound right, but like the most sought after of them,
the most
right?
praised,
the most loved, the most
the ones
lovable.
that other people look at and say, "Oh, those are great qualities."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
No,
and a lot of it is because reds are task oriented and extroverts, and so sometimes the strengths that we have can feel off putting to people who are very people oriented.
I heard a very inclusive word there. You said we.
I'm trying. Yes, I'm trying to own the fact that I do have some red, and it has been helpful to own.
Oh
that.
yeah.
And again, none of these colors or these temperaments are negative in and of themselves. They're not. But like yellows are loud, these reds can be powerful.
Yeah.
And so if the powerful isn't something that other people appreciate, then it can be a powerful.
Intimidating.
So I like the way they described it in the book, right? So they're extroverts who are task oriented. They speak boldly and confidently and will get things done at all costs.
Yeah.
Even when people or feelings get in the way, because they're not focusing on the people. They're focusing on the task. And that's not a bad thing. Like I said, I have a daughter who's a red. When I started reading, I was like, oh yeah, this is her. And I look at her and I'm like, man, I wish I could be more like that in some ways.
And it's like I said, there's some really good things in here. A lot of times you'll see reds step into leadership roles, which is another reason why sometimes reds are like, I don't really want to be that, because sometimes it's hard to be a leader. It's hard to kind of carry that. But so some of the strengths here are like moves quickly to action, competitive, articulate, persuasive, usually right. That sounds like a jerk thing to say.
And they know it.
Yeah, they know it.
They know they're right. Yeah,
make decisions easily, doesn't back down from a challenge, has a plan, has a purpose. Loyalty is a huge one for reds. So, gonna be loyal and can't stand it when people are not loyal. Good at delegating and motivating others, disciplined, logical. So some of those, because I think I'm the lone red at the table. Are you're
I'm 14 and 12, so I have 12 red.
Okay,
so I've got some of this.
You got some of this too.
Yeah.
Makes decisions easily. Not me. I'm so blue too that I'm in my head about the decisions that I make a lot, and so making decisions easily is not me. But I would definitely say moves quickly to action. Probably enjoys physical challenges, self-directed, good at completing tasks, efficient, productive, like some of those things. That's me for sure. I'm looking at the weaknesses. Impatient, yes, ask my children. Because I have a lot of blue, I feel like I'm really sympathetic to others' emotions. So it's not that I'm unaware or unsympathetic. That doesn't fit me very well, but I can see it in some other reds that I know. Yeah. What do you think? What do you see?
As far as the strengths and the weaknesses? Yeah. So like in a past life, I was definitely more competitive. And it's really funny when I say that because people are like, no, you're still competitive. And I'm like when I am and I'm not. It's so funny, like in pickup games in basketball, like, yes, I want to win. Or even coaching, yes, I want to win. But it's more about development and the fun, right? So it's like that piece of me has kind of gone away. I would say articulate, persuasive, comfortable being the leader. Makes decisions easy is a fun one for me too, because it is. I'm so indecisive sometimes.
Think so much, but it's because you're up here, right?
Exactly, and that's where I'm an introvert, absolutely. So I'm constantly thinking through things, but then I'm not afraid once the decision has been made to actually go forward with it. I don't mind a challenge. I'd like to have a plan and a purpose. Committed and loyal. I love what you said about like loyalty as well. It's kind of go to the Enneagram too, and I'm a 6. Wants responsibility, absolutely. And I think there's a level of wanting to contribute that's there. Definitely resourceful, self-directed, sees the big picture. That's me through and through. Weaknesses, see, and this is where it's like the second, like my other color is going to show more of my weaknesses than the reds.
Yeah.
I will question authority, absolutely, because I'll do that good old Texas. Oh, bless your heart. The whole Bane,
and mean it like the Texans do.
Yeah. Like the whole Bane in The Dark Knight Rises, when he says something and Bane says, "And you believe this gives you power over me?" Right. That is definitely my like kind of thing.
Yeah, there's some in here that it's like unrepentant, avoids apologizing. No.
I think sometimes like the ends can justify the means. There's certain means that I'm going to give for, but as far as like hurt or harm, I'm never okay with that.
Yeah.
I think 8 is something.
Struggles to slow down and relax.
Oh yeah,
that
absolutely.
Could be a weakness.
I was going to say.
Yeah, I struggle to slow down and relax for sure.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so those pieces of the red I definitely resonate with, and I appreciate it in the chapter, speaking the language of power and control. And again, and that's where reds can be like, oh,
that sounds like an evil villain.
But it's so funny actually because I think blues can have that control word more than
order.
And reds order. Yes, that's a good.
Yeah.
So
my red child, like there's no doubt we've always said she's going to be a lawyer. Because this arguing kind of thing, and this is right, this is wrong.
Logical, black and white, concrete.
And I'm going to call you on it if it's not. Even people in authority, right? Being in high school now, it's kind of interesting to listen to her and some dynamics she's got with some of her classes. She's in an early college high school, right? So as a freshman was taking dual credit and AP classes.
Yeah.
And now as a sophomore has even more. And so she's got this one class where it's notes. She's a very bright kid. And she's like, I don't need all these notes. I can learn it. What is the point of this?
Yeah.
And she and this teacher are having conversations. I mean, based on what she's saying, I'm like, okay. I mean, it could be taken as rude, but I'm like, she really is just trying. So she finally, the other day, she was like, I have a plan. And I said, great. What is your plan? The next time we have all these notes, I'm going to ask him to do the notes. And if he can do them in 30 minutes, then I'm going to tell him I won't say another word about it. And I was like, okay, that could be rude.
Yeah.
But she's processing it from, okay, you're saying it should take me 30 minutes, but it's taking me an hour.
Yeah.
And I'm bright. It can do things pretty quickly. And so I'm looking at this and I'm like, oh yeah, this one situation, I'm like, yep.
You can see it just clear as day.
And it's not, like I said, she likes this teacher. It's not you know, she likes him. She's just like, hey,
this expectation
isn't right.
Yeah.
You know, the wrong thing.
Yes.
And your expectation is not, you know, what you're expecting from us. We have lives.
Yeah.
Is her words. I'm like, this is going to be interesting to watch play out.
Right, no doubt.
Oh my goodness.
I'm like, yeah, so I'm seeing the strengths and the weaknesses in this whole little
thing.
Like, oh, this is fun.
All right.
Watch it play.
Our next color is the blues. So the blues, who had some high blue? I had 11, so I had 12 red and 11 blue.
I was, my other is
That was
blue.
my other
for
low
sure.
one.
Yeah, there you go.
I don't even know what my numbers were. I just know it was yellow.
That sounds right. That sounds right. So some of the melancholic or blue strengths are creative, often musical and artistic, sensitive, emotional, plays and works well alone, honest, detailed. I'm just kind of picking and choosing here. Able to stay focused, Forms deep friendships, quality over quantity. Like structure and routine, good at arranging and organizing. Cautious, methodical, compassionate, content to stay in the background. Great listener. Likes to be on time and have a schedule. So yeah, these are your people who are introverted in the way they communicate and task-oriented. So you're going to tend to see some perfectionism and a desire for things to be just so and in an order that they can handle. So what troubles me about this sometimes is they speak the language of order and perfection. Is that right? That's the two? Okay. But it's not necessarily your definition of order and your definition of perfection, right? It's theirs. So that's a key thing to unpack. So like my daughter is not a neat freak, but she has her specific order and what is perfect in her mind when she puts things away or sets things up. It's very thoughtful. It's very purposeful. Makes no sense to me and is kind of gross. But, whether it's like where she puts her socks, I don't get it. But that was a key thing to me to unlock this because I'm like, my handwriting is terrible. I'm a piler, not a filer. Like, I don't know if I really am blue. And it's like, no, I definitely have my way of setting things up and doing things. And I've thought about it. And so that's what, that is the order and perfection. It makes sense to me. Yeah. And so like when it's tweaked, I get tweaked because it's not, it's not functioning the way I need it to. So there's a sense of, when things are in order, I feel safe. That's another piece of this blue that really helped me to figure out some of my own stuff.
But I can see where blue and red would kind of fit together, right?
Yeah, they're not diagonal, right?
No.
So, which are mine? I'm diagonal.
yours seem to be a diagonal.
But I'm also just everything but yellow.
Yeah.
So.
So like they're I'm an ambivert, and I've known that for a while now. I have a certain amount of I have a certain amount of extrovert energy and a certain amount of introvert energy. And so, yes, I process things externally sometimes, and other times it's got to be internal or I'm going to lose my mind. And so, sometimes while I was teaching, it would be like, I'd spend all my extrovert stuff in the classroom and then I'd get home and I'm a homebody, don't talk to me. Because I have a limited supply of each. But in both cases, I was task oriented.
See, and this is what's so interesting. So like with all of my color things, like, so again, with the red, I was very, there's the task oriented side of the red, I totally get.
Yeah.
The task oriented side of the blue is foreign to me. Right. And so, but then you have the people oriented piece, which is why once we get to green, it's like, yeah, that's my color. Cause it's the people oriented and the introvert. Right. So it's really interesting because the introverted stuff of the blue, I totally resonate with because creative, absolutely. Plays and works well alone, sure. But I also like working well with other people. Serious and purposeful, people would have told me that for sure. Stay focused and calm, yep, absolutely. Aware of others' feelings, yep. Good at arranging and organizing, not my office, but in people, right? When it's people oriented, yes. Task oriented, maybe not. Logical or methodical, sure. Problem solver, great listener. Not so much a perfectionist or not on time all the time. I do have a schedule. I know I need one, but it's more that. And then on the weaknesses side of things, slower to make friends, probably. And again, this is where the green's going to nail me because I'm looking at this like a red list. I'm like, not all of these speak to me so much. So it's one of those. So interesting to see the blending of the way God's wired me a little bit. But
and some of these seem contradictory. So like while a red might be confident, a blue lacks self-confidence. And so it depends on the situation, but I got them both, what we're going to recommend is look at the dominant color for yourself and your children. You're going to see some things that seem to be in conflict because you're a unique human being with unique DNA and fingerprints and all the things and experiences and so on and so forth. So
unique wiring,
don't get caught up if you're not fitting the list perfectly or if there seem to be some contradictory pieces. Go with the dominant color as much as you can. If you've got to, good luck like me. But yeah.
Right. But I think the big takeaway too is, right? Like, so if you have a kid like me that's like seems all over the place, at least one great takeaway is there's no yellow. So the way that you would talk to or motivate a yellow, just don't even try it. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
I think that's key because because I spent a lot of time in the yellow and the green, which was resonate with me. But as I was looking at my 3 boys, this is so my oldest, right? And in a lot of ways, also my wife.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I started to see things that irritate me as a father. And I was like, same thing irritates me as a husband, kind of. Because they both have those very similar perfectionists, all that kind of. But again, when it comes to like, both my wife and my oldest son, friendships, they don't have a lot, but when they do,
they're
like
big, yeah.
And I have like 1 million friends, and I can't tell you if any of them are my best friends.
Yeah.
To be honest. Hello, this is online. Anyway, I love you guys all.
It's you.
You're all my best friends. But yes. But so it's really neat for me as I was processing and reading this book was not only was I starting to find clues in how to communicate with my son, but it also helped me communicate with my spouse as we start to figure out, okay, makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good. As you were talking, I was like, wait, I've never put my parents through the test. And I'm like, one's a green, one's a blue. So it's kind of fun to like.
Yeah. With the melancholic, the blue weaknesses, there's some really interesting ones here. And so like, let's say you're a task-oriented parent and you're dealing with a child who lacks self-confidence, can get hung up on details, takes things personally, is pessimistic, self-sabotaging. For me, I know what this feels like because I've been there. I've been a absolutely blue adolescent. But I'm also very red. So I'm like, okay, well, I just gave you the truth. Like, no, you're fine. And you're having a hard time getting out of that because you're stuck in your blueness. Like there are some of these, like, so as you're listening to these weaknesses, be aware of how you're processing them. Because if some of them, it's like, ugh, that sounds horrible, or, oh, I know what that's like. Just be aware that that's a friction point where their weakness is coming right up against either your strength or your own weakness. So like my red impatience with this hanging on to sad feelings, that's going to be a point of friction. And so that needs some special attention in your relationship with your kid. So yeah, just keep on listening for those as we go through these strengths and weaknesses. All right, look at this green. I wrote notes over every other one, but I don't have I don't really have a green in my house. I'm not very green. I thought I wanted to be.
I'm definitely a green. Yeah. People-oriented, but introverted. Yeah.
That's me too. That's my second dominant. And it's like between green and yellow, it's only 2 numbers off.
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's me and red. Yeah.
So I have no red or blue, very little, but my green was much strong. Because when I look at myself, I feel like I'm always agreeable. Considerate of others, things like that, forgives easily, willing to share. I knew even a lot of times I would be willing to go without a lunch, for example, if my friend didn't have lunch money to pay for the lunch, stuff like that. Just, as I was reading this, I was like, yes. But
I just appreciate where this section started. In the lower part of the quadrant, these kids are people-oriented introverts. Yes. I was like, yes, it is possible, right?
Yeah.
People-oriented introverts. It sounds like an oxymoron, but it's not. It's not.
These are those loyal friends, those, go with the flow and just want people to, hey, what do you think? Okay, works for me. Like these are very agreeable people in general. So what are some of the strengths?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking through this list, easygoing, kind, considerate, good friend, calm, agreeable somewhat. My red makes me not so agreeable sometimes. Plays and works well alone, sure, but that people-oriented side makes me want to be in a team and work together with others. Forgives easily, absolutely. Willing to share, patient, reliable, happy. That's such a weird word for me always, right? Because I'm always the happiness or joy conversation. Good manners, well-behaved, great team player. Helpful. I love being helpful. I want to contribute. That's the only thing I want to do. So I appreciate, right, when you go to the weaknesses, it's going to say things like, where was it? Like, doesn't want to lead or
avoids responsibility.
Yeah, but it's like, it's not so much that as it is like, I don't need to, right? So that's the piece of the red where I don't need to be up front. I'm just trying to contribute here.
Can it be would
rather watch.
Content, consistent, good listener. But on this side, right, certainly the messy, The indecisive, again, I've been told since I was a kid I was indecisive, but it's one of those, I'm a processor. So as long as I can process it, I'll get to it, and then I'll be the stubborn whatever, and that's my weakness, because it's
I
like,
thought
no,
through this.
This is it. Like, bless your heart, but this is it, right? Resents being pushed. I don't know about that necessarily.
I hear some resentment there.
Right?
No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. But I don't know if I'm hard to get moving or uninvolved. Selfish is such an interesting one, right? Yeah. I'm like, am I? Like that's where my brain went. Am I really selfish? Too compromising. I can see that a little bit.
Yep.
Procrastinates. Amen. Right. Yeah. Can appear lazy. And again, all these are kind of molding together for me in all the strengths and the weaknesses. But I particularly love just going back to that whole people-oriented introvert. Mm-hmm. That nails me to the wall. Yeah.
I think for me, because being an extrovert and being a yellow, but then having such a dominant green as well, I realized that my introvertness comes around adults. And not with children.
It does though.
Yes, it does.
Dude, so I've noticed this though. Because knowing you're an extrovert.
Yeah.
Right? And knowing you're social and knowing like you can't sit still when you're in a group setting, right? You're always doing something. And then to see you in a group of adults, and then it's like after 10 minutes of conversation, it's, oh, now Uma speaks. And I'm sure even people who listen to the podcast have seen the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? It's funny, I was listening in the car, just one of the episodes of last season. And like I'm listening along, and I'm telling y'all, it was like 15 minutes into the podcast. And then I hear Uma's voice. And I was like, oh, Uma was there. Okay, good. But I've noticed that in adult settings, you could be very introverted rather than extroverted.
And that might be a helpful piece to unlock. What is it? Where do you see these coming out in your kids? Is my daughter more extroverted around her friends and more introverted at home? You might see that, and there's probably a good reason for it. And so, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, absolutely. I've seen this, right? It's so funny when you go talk to a parent and they're like,
they're not like this.
Well, like in a small group setting or whatever, and they're like, yeah, so-and-so never talks. And they're like, are you kidding me? Right?
Yeah.
Or like a coach says it, or I've seen this, right? So even recently, like in a classroom setting, a kid is quiet, but on a team, they can't stop talking.
Yep.
And that's why I've enjoyed being involved in different aspects of life here at Trinity, because like you get to see kids in different environments.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many times just going on a retreat and being the adult in a room at night with a room full of junior high boys.
Yes.
You finally get to know personalities.
That sounds very scary.
But you finally get to know personalities. You're like, where did that come from? That silliness, that joke, that leadership even sometimes. It's like, I didn't know that about you, because you're always Mr. Quiet in the classroom, doesn't say a word. And then I see an entirely different side of you. And I kind of appreciate that.
And you see the opposite way. You see rambunctious kids maybe in the classroom, but then in different environments, they're just quiet and, not engaged as much. And so it's just where's their comfort zone.
Yeah. And so like a green is a really interesting temperament, because if they're excited about it, they'll be excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If they're not super excited about it, you're not going to hear much from them.
Yeah.
They're not going to fight you on it. They're just going to be, like, okay.
Because that was so interesting, is like I was saying unenthusiastic or unexpressive. And I was like, people would probably be surprised to hear that about me. But
if you don't care about it,
right? If it's not an area of one of my passions, it's one of my passions, you are going to hear it.
You're going to know it. Yeah.
You're going to see it. But if it's not, I'm kind of like, okay, cool.
So I think that comes out in your preaching a lot.
Yeah.
Like the passion and stuff.
Sure.
You're so excited.
And you're geeking out about something you love. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's, my daughter, she says like, play as well alone. Yeah. She can do that when she's doing something she enjoys. Other times, she's just, that's not at all what she wants to do. She resents being pushed. Like she can do something all day long if she's interested in it. When she's not interested in it, you ain't going to get her to move. Like it's just not going to happen. And that just throws me, because I'm like, how can you be so focused here and be so unwilling to do a thing over here? And it's because of the interest level that's coming out of the green. Just a ton, again, so helpful to be like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and just see that.
I have your interest. That's why we're motivated here. I don't have your interest. That's why we're not motivated here.
Yeah. And I love speaks the language once again, speaks the language of calm and harmony.
Calm and harmony.
Right. And I think too, it's so funny, like I think about the household that I grew up in. And for whatever reason, being the lower middle, the true middle of the family, you had, I said true middle, right? Have we talked about this in the podcast?
Yeah, I
wasn't the oldest. I wasn't the youngest. I wasn't the girl. I was Lee, right? So, but being that, like when people had problems, I found in that whole listener, right? So people would come and share things and I would all of a sudden connect dots, right? And I would say, oh, we need a family conversation. Let's do this, right? Let's talk. Let's come together. Let's get harmony. Let's calmly talk about these things rather than the very expressive conversations people might have had with me when it was a one-on-one situation. So like I see that all kind of playing out.
Yeah.
Story time. All right. So I loved being able to do this with my camp counselors. So I think I've told this story on the podcast before, but why not? New season. So when I was a camp director, my very first summer, Jan, I'm looking at you, right? It's just, you're so engaged. I love this.
She's so expressive.
Yes.
She's yellow.
Yes. I had exit interviews with all of my staff. Now, keep in mind, this is the place that I had worked at since I was 15. Now I was 23. 23, starting out. And a lot of these counselors were people that I had worked with. Okay. So there are a lot of peers. So it was a really strange situation. Now I'm the boss, blah, 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 blah. But I'm doing all my exit interviews that first summer. And like one of the main things when you get to, if you could fix anything about camp or the negative thing about camp, what is it? Number one word I got, drama. There was so much drama on the staff. Okay. So then it was in that next year that I learned about this kind of color approach. All right. And there was a simple teacher's test that I used with my staff that next summer. Now, that I loved the first time I gave this test. It was a really basic version of this test because like you saw the colors play out. I put everybody in different parts of the pavilion area. I had a lone red, and that red was sitting there tapping her foot the whole time because she wasn't leading at that moment. And she's like, okay, when can I go and be in charge and when can I do things? My table of yellows was over there just like doodling, like kicking each other under the table, and I had a ton of yellows. You can imagine camp counselors, and they were like picking at each other and all this other stuff and daydreaming, right? That's what they were doing because they wanted to be talking to each other. My table of blues was sitting there taking notes about everything that I was saying diligently there. And then my lone green was sitting there by herself and just happy that everybody was getting along and there was a little bit of harmony in the room, right? So it was so telling of the whole thing. Well, here's the thing. Like we did the whole process of learning who we are. That's how we're wired. I did the visual, see how people are so you know how to interact with them and things like that. And I did that for that summer and the 2 summers that followed. By the end of my 4th summer, guess what word I never heard in an exit interview? Drama. Right? Because it was all caused by not acknowledging people's wiring and not being able to see it. And I still vividly remember my very first year here, student ministry. And I'd have, I don't know what we called it, like crew core or some sort of leaders of student ministry. And I got really nervous. It was sometime in the spring when everybody was over involved and stuff like that. So I only had 4 kids and they were all greens.
Oh dear.
Yes. I was horrified, right? Because greens don't speak, greens don't talk. So I was like, okay, how is this going to work? And at that point, right, when I first tested, I was red, yellow. Right. But then because of like my years in the director position, my summers in the director position, and my whole staff was yellow, there was that whole, like Melanie, you shared with me that greens will often meet the need of the situation.
Yes.
Right.
For the sake of harmony and calm. And because they don't want to make waves, they will engage in a lot of different ways and plug in where they think it's going to be most helpful. Do what needs to be done. They're team players.
So that's where my red rose pretty high, but my yellow was also there too because my whole staff was yellow my first couple of summers. By the end, so summer 3, I tested red, green. And by summer 4, I was green, red, which I haven't changed since then, right? So I was finally able to like find who I actually was, not mask it anymore. Anyways, so I'm sitting in this conversation with these 4 greens, and y'all, it was one of the best student leader meetings I have ever had because without the reds in the room wanting to dominate, without the yellows distracting and also wanting to share all the thoughts that are on their brains, because both of those are extroverts.
Right.
Without those, the blues could finally speak. And it was some of the most thoughtful stuff I've ever heard in student ministry, reflecting on what we were doing, why we were doing it, why they show up and things like that. It was just the coolest thing ever. And I love my favorite illustration is I've done these things is going on a hike. If you're going on a hike, you need all 4 colors, right? Because we've talked about how all of them are needed.
They're all beneficial. Yep.
Your reds are going to say, we're going to get to the top of that mountain by 5 o'clock, right?
Yep.
That's what we're doing. That's the goal. Because it's so interesting, right? Because it said people-oriented, task-oriented, but I loved how it painted that reds were kind of more goal-oriented, right? I'm going to get to the goal. Your blues then are going to say, okay, red, we could go this way, this way, this way, or this way.
Options.
Yeah.
Right? They're really
out.
task-oriented. They've mapped it out. They thought it out. They're very
Detailed, very
logical.
thoughtful, yeah.
And the red goes, I don't care about that one. Okay.
Yeah.
And then your yellows are going to be like, all right, y'all are all business. Can I
got
play
the trail
music?
mix?
Who's
Yeah,
going?
right.
Let's look for the bears.
Yeah. Is this going to be any fun at all? Like, that kind of a thing. And then your greens, your me's are going to be like, y'all, look at the sunset. Isn't it so wonderful? Or look at the waterfall and the butterflies and the scenery. Y'all, can we pause and take this moment in? Or you're going to be calling for me at the very end because they're like, Lee, keep up, right? Because I'm taking in the beauty of the fullness of all of it. Yeah. Or even just the beauty of the
fact that we're together.
Yes,
guys.
exactly. So those are my favorite ones that I've used over the years.
And I've learned that I've taken advantage of some of the other temperaments
Ooh.
in my time. So, for example, as a yellow, I process out loud. So, in a 3-hour Zoom class that I do in grad school, I'm talking most of the time with either through text with my buddies or with the professor, talking about stuff. I'm not taking notes, but all the blues are taking notes. And I'm like, hey, bro, you want to send me a note? Because they're not saying anything. They're constantly taking notes. I'm like, and they have fantastic detailed notes.
Why should I take notes if they're going to do it for me?
Right. I'm like, I don't need to duplicate this. I'm going to be here
energy.
and engage with the professor and have fun. And they don't want to speak because if I'm not there, there's not a lot of discussion.
And it's funny, the green in me, I consider myself a note taker. I reference that a lot when I teach. But the way that I take notes, or even like, y'all, I have a manuscript of my sermon every time I preach. And I know people judge that hardcore, but I am drawing all over that thing. It's not like a blue would be horrified to look at it. Like, that is not organized. That is not not necessarily.
Right.
Well, because it depends on how
it's your order, your perfection.
So but I'll make little marks. I'll do all these things all over the side.
Yeah.
And that's the way my brain works, but it's more artful, I guess. It's more
Yeah.
It's so interesting. I love this. I love all the pieces of the colors. I love the conversation. Hopefully our folks listening are loving it too. I love the advice at the end of this chapter in particular so when it comes to your kiddos, when it comes to the ones you're raising up, whether that's in your household, whether that's on a team, whether that's in a classroom, it invites you to look for strengths and weaknesses.
Yes.
And then listen for words that they use or words that they don't use. Right? Because all the way through this chapter, we heard like yellows are going to be talking about who's there. Can I come help you?
Yeah.
Right? Whereas task-oriented people are going to be more of, can I help you with that?
Yeah.
Right? Can I do these things? And then again, are they worried about time? Are they worried about schedule? All these different things. And maybe that's some of the stuff I got to listen for as a coach. Because man alive, do I get asked so many questions by these new 6th and 7th graders.
Yeah.
It is something different.
And you might see the difference between the task and the people, but you also might see the processing differences, right? So who are your kids that are quick to process, that are quick to speak, that are out there chatting? Because even if you can narrow it down to that,
sure.
So like I because I'm weird and I fall into a pretty even split. I don't have a super strong dominant color. You're not going to peg me down necessarily as an introvert or an extrovert. You're going to see that I'm task oriented versus people oriented. But there are the opposite splits. So you might see somebody who is both task and people, right? But is more extroverted or more introverted. So however the quadrant goes, there will be something that will signal you to one half, that you're either introverted or extroverted, or you're clearly task or clearly people.
Yeah, because that's where I feel like I'm such in a weird spot, because I know I'm introverted, but people-oriented, task-oriented, yes.
Yeah.
And it's funny because with I'm thinking of our football team right now. Like, that's the season we're recording in right now. And I'm like, I can tell if they're introverted or extroverted. That's not a secret.
Yep.
But I can't. It's hard for me to determine in a coaching world what task-oriented or people-oriented looks like. Yeah. So I'm really curious. That's the part of the journey I'm looking forward to the most as far as these next chapters coming.
And I think it's almost interesting too when you think about task and people orientation and then look at how they will function within that setting. Like
that setting, yeah.
is your quarterback, do you want them to be a red? Or how does a yellow quarterback look? Like
Right.
if you
What is it
start
gonna
looking
look
at
like?
different positions and start looking at
And I
the
wonder,
task
because
about
I
that.
would think no, right? I would think it depends on their physical skills, not on their temperament.
Right.
It's just a matter of how do I leverage their temperament in this position,
Right.
Yes.
right? Because again, I'm not trying to change them. I'm trying to figure out how they're wired so I can communicate
Exactly.
with the right words and the right coaching and
Yeah.
things like
But
that.
I'm also thinking that some of these positions can lend to a certain temperament type.
Sure.
Well,
That might be fair.
I can see
Yeah.
that, like, because I think of just the difference of offense and defensive line, which, like, I was always told I was too nice to play defense.
Aw.
So, like, I talk about a green, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I was also too. Sometimes I would be told, and football players, this is not mean to say, like, we know this. I was also told I was too smart to play defense because I would think through things.
And you've got to be reactive. You've got to go.
Yeah, defense. You got to go. You got to be mean, and you got to go to the ball, and you got to react quickly. You can't think of things formulaically. You can't think of things logically because it doesn't make any sense playing defense on football. But an offensive approach, yeah, you
So
need
you
to know
have
the
to be able
plans.
to
You need to know
see
the patterns. You need to know your job,
Yeah.
your responsibility. So it'd be curious too to see how much of that wires a kid too.
Well, in the NFL and the college football, there's a direct link to that the highest GPA are O-linemen.
Oh yeah,
Every
Interesting.
O-lineman is the highest GPA.
absolutely.
But
lot of-
there's a word of caution here because sometimes, again, like, I look at my red and I'm like, I don't want to be red. Red is the bad guy, or so overgeneralization is going to be a temptation.
Sure.
A red can't do this,
Yeah.
or a yellow shouldn't do that, or a green is the best choice for this. Like, we don't want to
So
go to that
good.
extreme. Because the reality is that, again, your strengths can be leveraged, your wiring can work really well if you know how to apply and harness those strengths and how to manage the weaknesses in such a way that they.
And I think, that's what I was going to say. We learn about ourselves, right? So once you kind of figure out your wiring, and maybe you don't have these colors or these terms, but you start realizing, okay, in this situation,
Yep.
I need to do this.
Yeah.
Or this is what I'm going to.
This
So
is what the
my
situation calls
green,
for.
right? Who you guys were like, really is. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind from early on,
Yeah.
like when we would go to play dates with people we've known that she knew from birth, right?
What's
She's
funny is I just
sitting
think of
on
her
the
as
outside.
extroverted. That's
I
the
know,
funny
and
thing
she
to me.
is,
But she's
sort of.
people.
Okay.
She's sort of extroverted. Like
Yeah.
she would sit on the outside and watch. Like the whole reason we ended up at the
Interesting.
school we ended up with was because I knew she was really smart, but she was not social. Like there was no part
That's
of
so
her that was
fascinating.
ready to jump in and engage. And it took a lot of, I think, learning on her part how to do
Yeah.
that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because at least in
And I
scenarios
still
with
see
me,
it.
I just never thought there was a thought hidden from me when I talked with Peyton. I was
yeah.
like, she was always saying exactly what's
Yeah.
on her mind.
And there's a part of her that, I think she hides a lot.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah.
Well, and
She's-
it depends. Yeah, it depends. If you've got her interest,
And if
she
you have a
knows
good
that if you're
relationship
a
and
safe
it's something
spot,
she's interested in,
Yeah.
right? Then it's a different scenario.
Which is
than-
funny because as a green, I can relate to that. I can
For sure.
definitely
Mhm.
relate to that. I
Yep.
And
won't stop.
safety is big in that
Safety.
regard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no
Yeah.
doubt. Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
Good. Well, Melanie, as you were talking, I was
interesting.
reminded of my second year here, and I had a group of new sophomores, and I had like a very clear red, yellow,
Yeah.
very clear orange. Okay. And like, even in that moment, I told him his best friend
Yeah.
was a blue.
Yeah.
And I said, meet this guy.
Yeah.
Never let him leave your side.
Yeah.
Like all the way through high school as we're working through youth group, process everything, talk everything with
With
him.
him.
Because he had the direction, he had the energy, he had the enthusiasm. His best friend had the plan. Right?
Ah.
And so that kind of partnership, and it was kind of fun because that year too is when we looked
beautiful.
at Jesus's inner circle.
Yeah.
Oh, look at this, turn it all the way through. You had Peter,
Peter's a red.
very much a red, probably some yellow in him too, but very much a red, a leader, a director. James was your blue.
Mhm.
He was organized. He got the church organized. He was doing the different things.
Yep.
And John was your green, right? So John was the one that
Yeah.
like really felt, had the heart, things like that. So Jesus' inner circle even had 3 of these, 4. And I would imagine it's a pretty social group, always kind of being together. So your yellows were there.
Jesus? I'm just kidding.
All the
He
above.
was all 4 perfectly.
Divergent.
No
I relate.
weakness.
All the above.
So so this is a fun conversation. And if it's been a helpful conversation for you, we always encourage you, please please subscribe to the channel or whatever, subscribe to the podcast, whichever platform you're listening on. Certainly share it. And again, maybe you're a note taker and you're internalizing it all because you're such an introvert. Or maybe you just want to talk about it with someone because you have that extroverted piece.
We're here.
That's right.
Right?
We don't take notes.
Whatever it is, keep the conversation going. That's why we do this. I know I'm the note taker.
I don't even highlight. At least you highlight. I don't even highlight. I'm just like,
and I don't write in the book. That's so weird about me. I
I
don't write in the book. It's so interesting.
You don't write in the book?
I don't know why. Like sometimes I will. And once I get to writing in a book, I will keep
But
writing
speaking
in
of
a
the book, buy the book if you haven't, because
this
it's
is great.
chock
Yes.
full of resources, and you can go back to
and
it
QR
over and over
codes
again.
to scan the videos,
Videos.
watch kids that say, does this sound like my kid? All this
Say
other
this,
stuff.
not that, all kinds of good stuff.
All
I
sorts
need to
of
spend some time back
wonderful,
there.
wonderful things. And next we get to dive into chapter 3, which I haven't looked at the title of.
Innate needs.
And, ooh, good. That'll
Yes.
be fun.
Again, we're just going to add a whole nother layer that's going to be
That's
like,
fantastic.
aha, I got it.
That's
I see
awesome.
it.
Well, in the meantime, please communicate if that's you, if you're wired that way that you want to communicate, you want to share some thoughts. Or I've just loved it when people will stop me and say, I'm sure you haven't heard a lot, but I really love this, or I really love this.
Yeah.
Like that's always so fun and encouraging
nice,
too.
yeah.
So
Absolutely.
with that, friends, we'll see you next time.